Loneliness does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it settles in quietly, like dust on a shelf you pass every day but never think to wipe. Ethan Miller noticed it most in the evenings, when the apartment felt larger than it should have and the silence pressed against his ribs. He had been married to Daniel for 7 years, long enough for routines to replace surprises, long enough for affection to become assumed rather than expressed. Ethan still loved him, or at least believed he did, but love had begun to feel like something remembered rather than lived. Daniel Miller was not cruel or careless by nature. He was ambitious, disciplined, and permanently tired. His work followed him home in the form of emails, calls, and the distant look in his eyes while he nodded at things Ethan said without truly hearing them. Dinners were eaten quickly, conversations postponed, weekends promised and then forgotten. Ethan learned to measure time by what Daniel missed rather than what they shared. He told himself this was normal, that marriages went through phases, yet the ache in his chest argued otherwise. It was during one of those half-present evenings that Marcus Reed entered their lives. Daniel mentioned him casually at first, an old friend from years ago who was visiting for a few weeks before returning to Africa. Ethan expected someone loud and overwhelming, the kind of personality that filled rooms by force. Instead, Marcus arrived with an easy calm that felt immediately disarming. He had a steady voice, observant eyes, and a way of listening that made people feel as if their words mattered. From the first dinner they shared, Ethan sensed the difference. Marcus asked questions and waited for answers. He laughed softly, not to dominate the conversation but to encourage it. Daniel, distracted as always, seemed relieved to hand the social effort to someone else. Ethan noticed how Marcus watched the dynamics between them without judgment, as if reading a story written between pauses and unfinished sentences. Over the next few days, Marcus became a quiet presence in their routine. He joined them for coffee, accompanied Daniel to meetings, and sometimes stayed behind with Ethan when Daniel rushed out the door. Those moments were small but significant. Marcus would comment on a painting on the wall, or ask Ethan how long he had lived in the city, or what he missed most from his childhood. No one had asked Ethan questions like that in a long time. He found himself answering more honestly than he intended. Ethan felt guilty for enjoying the attention, though he couldn't name exactly why. Marcus was kind, nothing more, yet kindness can feel intimate when you have been starved of it. Ethan mentioned this to Lena Brooks during one of their late-night calls. Lena had known him long before Daniel, long enough to hear what Ethan didn't say out loud. "You sound different," Lena told him gently. "More awake. Just be careful you don't confuse being seen with being saved." Ethan laughed it off, but her words stayed with him. The invitation came unexpectedly. Marcus mentioned his return to Africa during breakfast one morning, speaking about it with a mix of familiarity and longing. He talked about landscapes, long drives, and the slow pace of life he missed. Almost as an afterthought, he turned to Ethan. "You should come with me," Marcus said. "Just for a while. A month, maybe. A change of air." Ethan froze, unsure whether it was a joke. Daniel, barely looking up from his phone, surprised him by smiling. "That could be good for you," Daniel said. "You've been restless lately." The words stung more than they should have. Restless. As if Ethan were a problem to be solved rather than a partner to be understood. He searched Daniel's face for hesitation, for concern, but found none. To Daniel, the suggestion was harmless, even generous. Marcus watched Ethan closely, not pressing, simply waiting. That night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept beside him. The invitation echoed in his mind, tempting and terrifying. A month away felt excessive, indulgent, and yet the idea of staying felt heavier. He imagined the distance might bring clarity, that absence could remind him of what he had or confirm what he feared he had already lost. In the days that followed, the decision took shape quietly. Marcus never pushed, never framed the trip as an escape. He spoke of it as an experience, something shared but not promised. Ethan appreciated that restraint, even as it made the choice harder. Daniel helped him look at flights, offering practical advice with the same detachment he applied to most things. There were no arguments, no dramatic moments, only a calm that felt unsettling. Lena called again the night before Ethan booked the ticket. "Are you running towards something or away from something?" she asked. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "Maybe both." When the confirmation email arrived, Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The date was set, the bags were packed, and explanations were unnecessary because no one had questioned him. That, more than anything, frightened him. The morning of departure came too quickly. Daniel hugged him at the door, brief and distracted, promising to talk soon. Marcus waited by the car, offering a warm smile that carried no assumptions. As they drove to the airport, the city blurred past, familiar and suddenly distant. At the terminal, Ethan paused before security, the weight of the moment settling in his chest. This was not just a trip, it was a step into uncertainty. He glanced at Marcus, who gave him space, understanding the gravity without naming it. When Ethan finally boarded the plane, he took his seat by the window and fastened his belt with steady hands. As the aircraft began to move, he felt the ground slip away beneath him, along with the version of himself who had believed staying was safer than leaving. Africa greeted Ethan Miller with heat that felt both heavy and cleansing, as if the air itself demanded honesty. From the moment he stepped off the plane beside Marcus Reed, the familiar structure of his life loosened its grip. The days moved differently here, unhurried and deliberate, and Ethan found himself adjusting his breath to match the rhythm around him. Marcus handled everything with quiet confidence, guiding him through airports, roads, and conversations as if this place were an extension of his own body. They stayed in a modest house on the edge of a lively neighborhood, where mornings began with distant voices and the scent of strong coffee. Ethan noticed how Marcus respected the space between them, never assuming closeness yet always available. That balance unsettled him more than overt attention would have. In Daniel's absence, the contrast sharpened. Marcus noticed when Ethan grew quiet, when his smile faded, when he lingered at the window a second too long. They spent their days exploring slowly. Long drives stretched into conversations that wandered without destination. Marcus spoke about his past with a calm openness, sharing stories of leaving and returning, of learning how distance reshapes love. Ethan listened, absorbing more than the words themselves. There was no performance in Marcus's voice, no urgency to impress. It made Ethan feel safe enough to speak about his own life in fragments, revealing pieces he had never organized into a full confession. At night, Ethan lay awake in the unfamiliar quiet, scrolling through messages from Daniel that were polite and brief. "Hope you're having fun," Daniel wrote once, as if Ethan were on a casual vacation rather than a journey that felt quietly transformative. Ethan replied carefully, choosing neutral words, unwilling to burden Daniel with thoughts he wasn't sure he understood himself. One evening, after a long walk through narrow streets glowing under low lights, they sat outside, sharing a simple meal. The conversation drifted into silence, comfortable but charged. Marcus broke it gently. "You don't talk about Daniel much," he said, not accusing, only observing. Ethan hesitated, then answered honestly. "I don't know how to explain what's missing without sounding ungrateful." Marcus nodded, as if he understood that dilemma intimately. "Sometimes absence isn't about love disappearing," he said. "Sometimes it's about being unseen." The words landed with precision, naming what Ethan had avoided admitting. He felt a sudden urge to defend his marriage, to list Daniel's virtues, but the impulse faded. Marcus wasn't asking for justification. He was simply listening. Later that night, Ethan called Lena Brooks. Her voice steadied him, as it always had. He told her about the conversations, about how present Marcus felt, about the guilt that followed each moment of comfort. Lena listened quietly. "Emotional closeness can be more dangerous than anything else," she said softly. "Because it feels innocent until it isn't." Ethan knew she was right. The danger wasn't in what had happened but in what could happen if he stopped paying attention to his own boundaries. As the days passed, that boundary grew thinner. Not because Marcus crossed it, but because Ethan leaned toward it. Shared laughter lingered longer than necessary. Glances held meaning even when neither acknowledged it. Ethan became acutely aware of his own reactions, the warmth in his chest when Marcus said his name, the disappointment when their conversations ended. One afternoon, they visited a quiet place overlooking a wide stretch of land. The view was expansive, the horizon unbroken. Ethan felt small in a way that was both humbling and clarifying. Marcus stood beside him, hands in his pockets, saying nothing. The silence pressed in, intimate and revealing. "I'm afraid," Ethan admitted suddenly. Marcus turned to him, eyes serious. "Of what?" "Of realizing I want something I shouldn't," Ethan said. "And of going home knowing things can't stay the same." Marcus did not reach for him. He did not offer comfort that would blur the line between them. Instead, he spoke carefully. "Wanting isn't the same as choosing," he said. "But choosing comes eventually." That night, Ethan barely slept. He thought of Daniel, of the life they had built, of promises made without understanding how much maintenance they required. He thought of Marcus, of the way being truly listened to had awakened parts of him he had neglected. The conflict settled deep in his chest, heavy and unavoidable. The next morning, Ethan suggested they cut the trip short. The words surprised him as they left his mouth. Marcus studied him, searching for something beneath the surface. "You don't have to decide everything now," Marcus said. "But running won't give you answers either." Ethan knew then that the journey wasn't about distance or geography. It was about confronting the truth he had postponed for too long. He wasn't sure what he would do when he returned home, only that pretending nothing had changed was no longer an option. As the days counted down, the unspoken tension between them remained unresolved, a quiet hum beneath every interaction. When the return flight finally appeared on the calendar, Ethan felt both relief and loss. Whatever this experience had awakened in him would not disappear simply because he boarded another plane. On the final evening, they stood outside once more, the air warm and still. Marcus looked at Ethan with an expression that held restraint and understanding in equal measure. "Whatever you choose next," he said, "make sure it's honest." Ethan nodded, knowing that honesty would come at a cost he had not yet measured. As he packed his bag later that night, he realized the real journey was only beginning, and the consequences of this month would follow him long after he returned home.